really do a count. Yeah, it's difficult to do a countdown because it's like watching that thing. I think that's probably 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So it's good evening from Table Tennis Scotland. My guests tonight are all full-time professional coaches, have all worked for the national governing bodies in England, in Scotland and in Wales, and all have Commonwealth medals. In Craig Bryant's case, he's a silver medalist, and Paul Whiting, he's a Commonwealth bronze medalist, and the same with Steve Gertson. He's also a bronze Commonwealth medalist. Once again, we've got Mark Lundberg, who's a national selector and a former international, will be asking the difficult questions. And we've got our current Scottish champion and British champion, Colin Dalglish, who will also be on the panel. Matt, once again, will keep us right with the YouTube questions and queries. And we're looking forward to Ben Hart and many others forwarding questions. Just to put things into perspective, our guests tonight are 640 miles apart. We've got Paul down in Plymouth and Steve in Inverness. So how about that? Anyway, we'll start with Craig. Memories of Scotland, Craig.
Memories of Scotland. I think the last time I was up there for table tennis, I was about 18. And I think it was the British Championships, the Senior British Championships in Largs. When I played with the likes of Peter Clemenson and Bryn Drinkle. I don't think the results went our way that couple of days, but that is my last memory of table tennis in Scotland, other than visiting Steve at his guest house a few years ago. That's probably my most recent visit to Scotland as well. But yeah, good memories. I think the centre's still going. I think Steve still runs some stuff there as well. So yeah, some good memories of Largs.
Brilliant. Paul?
Yeah, for me it was Edinburgh. I'm going back now probably 40 years playing Schools International in Edinburgh. England team was Colin Wilson, Graham Sandley, John Souter and myself. So 4 players playing in Scotland, in Edinburgh. Then as a senior playing at the Drum. So when we played Senior British League, we played matches at Drumchapel, and we used to drive from Plymouth to Glasgow because we never had enough money to fly. So we would drive up. It took about 8 hours driving, and then with stops as well. But there were some good memories there. And I can remember once we finished playing a match with them and then played 5-a-side afterwards. So made the most of our trip up there. And then a bit like Craig.
Side, Paul. Hang on, this is important. 5-a-side, what are you? But I've got a really good team now. I've got Charlotte Carey in the team. I've got Ryan Jenkins. So where do you play?
Me, I'm at the back.
Oh, good. You mean?
Yeah, I'm like the midfield general, Dave. Midfield
pretty
general.
Solid, pretty
solid. So you mean defence then, Paul?
Yeah, always defensive, Steve.
Not midfield.
Okay, guys. Right. So we're going to stick to the same order all night, which will be Craig, Paul, and Steve. What is interesting, you've all worked for governing bodies, which includes me as well, I suppose. But now you're all self-employed. Now that is an interesting transformation. So I'm going to start with Craig there. So what are you doing now, Craig?
I am working for my own company at the minute. So I do a variety of coaching during the week. It tends to be one-to-one training. Anyone from 80 years old is my oldest client, who's just looking to get a bit better in the league. And then I work with the likes of Mari Baldwin and Lauren Loosemore, who are up and coming juniors. Mari's national champion cadet. She got to the finals of the senior national championships this season. So a large variety of levels that I work with throughout the week. And then the weekend tends to consist of visiting various clubs around the country. I market myself to different clubs and kind of just do visiting sessions, as well as still doing some work for Table Tennis England and being involved in some of their youth programs as well. So quite varied work, but yeah, as you say, self-employed, all running through my business at the moment.
Excellent, excellent. Paul?
Yeah, I'm self-employed as well, Dave. I work for Jula Plymouth Table Tennis Club. So that's the only work I do. Apart from, I do assist at some of the, like Craig, at some of the England national junior squads, Hopes and Aspire squad, the younger age groups. Also, on occasions, I take players abroad to tournaments for England as well. But my main day-to-day work is at the club, where I run 2 sessions every day, and then taking those players to tournaments at weekends. And we try and go at least once a year. We try and go away as a club to Czech Republic for a tournament and training camp as well.
Can you just give us a couple of minutes on this? Because one of the things our coaches have often spoken, so our guests have often spoken about, is that we've got this almost urge to play at the European Youth Championships. And you're saying you're going, I mean, would that be better value for our players, do you think? Or?
It's great value, Dave. It's a 3-day training camp followed by 3 days of competition. So you're there for about a week. Yeah. And it probably ends up with flights and accommodation. You know, the accommodation at the training camp's not great. It's like an old Eastern European sports facility. Yeah. It works out about £500 for the week. And the team event it's a 2-day team event, and they play to position. So they keep playing, and they probably play 7 or 8 matches. They have to lose 3 times before they're out. Yeah. And the girl that Craig was talking about, Maury Baldwin, went with us last year, and they won the cadet team event there. So it's a good level for our players. It's not, you know, there are some good players there, but it's not the highest level. It's more like a club event, but it's really good value for money, and they get stacks of table tennis as well.
Yeah, I think we must start looking into that, Stephen. And I'm coming over to you now as well. What are you doing, Steve, these days?
Yeah, it's a bit different for me since I moved to Scotland. Have in the past, like you said, always been full-time with governing bodies, with Wales, England, and organisations like Greenhouse Charities. So the last 5 years, been doing it alone. Part-time table tennis coach, part-time sports lecturer, doing 3 days a week at Murray College UHI Sports as a sports lecturer, and then combining that with my own coaching. So that's similar to Craig, really. A lot of sort of one-to-ones with all different range of abilities, from up to 82-year-old is the oldest gentleman I coach, down to 7, 8-year-olds, and from all different levels. Done a lot of sessions with Colin since I've been in Scotland, and a lot with the top juniors, and freelancing for obviously Table Tennis Scotland, and doing the national squad sessions as well. Still get about. Just go do camps with Craig down in England 3 times a year. We had our next one lined up in Plymouth, actually, with Paul, looking like that's going to be cancelled. But do a lot of community clubs, and nothing in comparison to Paul's club in Plymouth, which is an awesome club, by the way. Really looking forward to getting back there. But yeah, that's kind of a bit of an insight into what I do day to day.
Yeah, you've just spoken about the national training camps, which you've successfully conducted this last year. You've had a change of venue this year. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we've moved the camps to Largs. The camps are going great at John Chapel High School as well, but obviously there was costing issues, and the facility became really expensive throughout Glasgow Council and many other local authorities as well. So we moved it to Largs, and been a great move for us. So because we get to do the residential side of it, we get to have more time on the table, get to spend a proper full weekend with the players. And it's, first time we started it, Dave, and you were obviously a big driving force behind organising it and the logistics of it. So, yeah, we've done, what did we manage? 4 weekends this year. We missed one, didn't we, because of the virus, but been really successful, and players from all over the country have been attending. So it's been really positive.
Yeah, I'd like to ask both Craig and Paul a similar question. How would you compare residential camps to non-residential camps? Again, if you can advance on what Stephen said, Craig.
I think the positive for me with a residential camp is it's an opportunity to get to know the players a lot more as well. So much of coaching is knowing your players and understanding how they work, not just what they do on the table. I find with day camps, or if it's, you know, they're going away for their own accommodation, you just get to really see them in the hall. For me, the residential, you like I said, you spend a bit more time with them, downtime with them, figure out how they tick, make better connections with the players, build better relationships. So yeah, I can see those residential weekends having quite a big impact.
If I can ask sort of Paul to advance on that, it's this, if you've got a residential camp, Paul, everybody wants to play with the best player. How do you manage that?
Normally, if I'm scheduling maybe a 3-day camp, I'll try and group the players, but I'll always move players up and down.
Yeah.
And like during the course of a day, I'll normally try and play level up and down. So you play with someone on your level, you play with someone better than you, and you play with someone maybe slightly below your level.
Yeah.
But always trying to keep that variety.
Yeah.
And if you don't know the players at all, sometimes just a bit of top table at the start to try and sort out where players' level are. But sometimes people's training level can be different to their playing level.
Sure.
I think the other thing with residentials as well, though, Dave, I was going to go on a little bit from what Craig said.
Please
I think you don't lose the travelling time. So you've got time in the evening with the children to maybe watch videos of matches and discuss the matches. So you can get some quality time about how they think about table tennis, not just how they hit the ball.
Yeah. I mean, and that's really important. And I was at a Commonwealth meeting recently, and they felt that it was so important that within the governing bodies, the players had residential training camps, because they have found in the past that players from other sports have gone off to play in the Commonwealths, and believe it or not, they've hardly ever spent a night away from home. And so therefore, as Paul has quite rightly said, that's all part of the training, isn't it? Making do with whatever food you've got on the table, learning to sleep, you know, with in a different bed, different environment, and yeah, excellent. Right, I'm going to get a yes and no, and it's straightforward, yes or no. Craig, can you improve by playing a player weaker than yourself?
Yes, no question. Yes.
Paul, can you improve by playing a player weaker than yourself?
Yes.
Stephen, can you improve by playing a player weaker than yourself?
Yes.
Colin, can you improve by playing a player weaker than yourself?
Off mute there, sorry. Yes.
Mark, can you improve by playing a player weaker than yourself?
No fun if I say yes, but I suppose it's yes.
Okay, well, I'm hoping that message gets through to everybody. Right, before I think I'll just carry on a little bit longer, then I'm going to let Colin and Mark off the leash. Is you're all players. You played, as you say, once you win a Commonwealth medal, it proves you're a pretty good player. You've played for your countries. How did you get into coaching? We'll stick to the same. We'll go for the silver medalist first. Craig, you can answer first as the senior medal holder.
Well, okay, I'll take that honour. Thanks. Yeah, I kind of fell into coaching really. I attended Grantham College as a player from age 16 when it first opened, and Bradley Billington was our coach there. He put us through an ETTA level 1 course with Derek Marples, who ran the course back then. So I obtained the qualification quite early on. Didn't do much with it at the time, but after my first job, which was in recruitment, there was an opportunity to get into table tennis, which was the Southeast regional coach position. The minimum requirement was to have a coaching qualifications, and fortunately enough, I had it, and that allowed me to be considered, to apply for and to be considered for that position. I think my playing background helped me get that position too. Jill Parker was the line manager. I knew Jill very well from working through various levels as a player as well. And it was kind of falling out of love of the job that I had that kind of led me down the path of exploring coaching opportunities.
Well, Paul, I remember going down to Devon, and you was a player, and all of a sudden you become a coach. How did that happen?
Well, I was playing. I was working, but playing virtually as many, well, virtually full-time hours, but at least two to 3 hours every day practicing. And Don Parker was the national coach then of England, and he asked me if I would practice with some of the young players who lived in either Devon or Cornwall. So it started with a guy called Neil Bevans. So table tennis, or ETTA as it was then, used to employ me on a sort of ad hoc basis just to train with the players. So I worked with him, then I worked with Alex Perry, then latterly Craig and some other young players that were near the top of the England junior rankings, but obviously living a long way down, it was difficult for them to get to all the training sessions. So really I started as a practice partner. So I didn't see myself as a coach. I was just practicing with the players and trying to pass on some knowledge and information. And then I was doing it at the same time as there was a guy called John Vinson in Plymouth who ran the coaching for the Plymouth League. So I was doing the one-to-ones in one room while he was running sessions in the other. Then John decided to retire from coaching, and the league asked me if I would take on the role of coaching officer for Plymouth as a volunteer. So I did that for about 15 years as a volunteer. So I was working in the dockyard in Plymouth and coaching 2 to 3 nights a week at the league headquarters. So I did that. They put me through all my coaching, paid for me to go through my coaching qualifications. And then in 2009, I had the opportunity to take redundancy from the dockyard. So I left the dockyard in Plymouth in 2009, where I've been an engineer for 30 years, and went full-time coaching and managed to get a job with Table Tennis England as a regional coach, similar to Craig and Steve. So I went full-time from 2009 until August last year, where I left Table Tennis England, and now I'm just working for myself. But it was a little bit like Craig. I didn't intentionally want to be a coach. It just happened for me, you know.
Yeah, interesting. And Stephen?
Yeah, I started coaching really young, Dave. I remember I won the Welsh national title at 16, and just straight after I won that final, a really good player, and who was involved in the Paralympic setup at the time, asked me to start coaching a boy called Paul Karabalik, who's from Swansea, where I'm from, and Paul has had an amazing career, and he's just been selected for Tokyo for the Paralympics coming up, and he was actually my first person that I wouldn't call it coaching at the time. It was, like the boy said, more just practicing because he's the same age as me. I was turning up and just having a knock of him, really. But it's the first time I started earning a little bit of money from coaching, and then following that, from 16, tried to obviously still play as well, but I was doing kind of a little bit of one-to-ones while I was in college and stuff like that, and doing a lot of volunteering while playing, in terms of going to home nations and stuff, coaching, captaining teams, just loads of volunteering for Wales, trying to get that experience, and did that for years. And then through university, even, I remember I started university, and I picked up a contract with Table Tennis Wales for 20 hours a week. So coaching, going into schools, this is from 18 years old. So I was coaching and involved in it very young. I'm not sure I wanted to be a coach so much. I wanted to maybe go down sports development route, but just sort of fell into place. And yeah, I was earning money while I was in university and still volunteering for Wales trips abroad and stuff, or home nations. And yeah, from there, just carried on working full-time in table tennis. Then went to work for Greenhouse Wales with the Jenkins brothers. Had a few great years working in the Rhondda Valleys with them, and actually Andrew McFadden from Jump Chapel as well joined us as well at that point, and great experiences there. Then moved to England, where I sort of got to know Craig and Paul a lot better, working with the regional setup and national setup with England, and then obviously I went back to Greenhouse in London actually for a couple of years before moving up here. And like I said, the last 5 years is the first time was not when I haven't been just solely focused on coaching. So it's it's been an interesting journey.
Just again, this is a quick one. Were you all still playing competitively at the time? Again, I'll go in this senior order. Silver medalist, if you can tell us first whether you were still playing during this time.
Yes, I was. I was still very competitive, still entering tournaments regularly, still trying to improve, still trying to get selected for trips and teams. So it was certainly made harder by going into coaching, but I suppose at that point I still would have labelled myself a player first and a coach second. I would say that's probably only changed in the last 6 or 7 years or so in my latter 20s. But yeah, early doors, I would certainly consider myself a player and was very active still at that age. Yeah.
Paul, was you?
Yeah, I would have said I was still playing when I was doing one-to-ones. I probably stopped playing competitively when I was about 30, 31. And that was basically when I started doing the voluntary role for Plymouth League, when I started to run coaching sessions for the league. But while I was doing one-to-ones, I was still playing competitively.
Stephen?
Yeah, I was still playing, Dave, from when I started coaching at 16 through to 25, but wasn't as good as Craig and Paul, that's for sure, as a career-wise. And I stopped improving, I think, looking back. From sort of 18 to 25, I managed to still play and keep sort of on the fringes of the Welsh squad and had some nice trips and stuff. But yeah, looking back, I didn't put enough time into my training, and my focus became more about coaching. I actually look back now, and probably coaching was my main priority. My education was second, and playing became my third priority through them years. And yeah, looking back, that's just the way it worked out for me. And my passion became very much about, my focus became around coaching rather than playing. So a bit different to the boys, I think.
I mean, my worry a little bit, not for you three guys, but certainly for Colin and Charlotte, and I've said this on air, is coaching should never take playing time over playing time while you're still competing, both mentally, because sometimes you can just be tired after coaching and then you just don't feel like practice. So you've got to get your priorities right, which is very difficult when you're trying to make a living. But it is very, very tempting, Colin and Charlotte, if you're listening, and others, to say, oh, I can just get 50 quid here, I'll do this session. And then you're not feeling mentally into practice.
I agree with that, Dave. I'll also throw out an alternative view. I think when I went into coaching and I really started to try and improve in my coaching,
good.
I started to think about the game in a completely different way, and I think that really helped me keep my level. I wasn't as quick as I was. I couldn't hit the ball as hard as I could, but I was a more intelligent player, and I could outwit people. And I think a lot of that came from my coaching experience and really just starting to think about the game. I mean, that could be down to maturity as well. It might not have just been the coaching.
I think it's a very good point.
But I think that certainly had an impact. I'm not suggesting that the likes of Colin and Charlotte should go into coaching for that reason. But for me anyway, I think that certainly had an impact on me maintaining a level over a number of years.
It's just on my point. Sorry, Paul. To butt in. Just on that, Dave, your point really. It had a big impact on me as a player, coaching too much for sure. And I totally agree with that. And I had to sort of balance between trying to pay student loans and accommodation and stuff. And I didn't probably get that balance right looking back as a player. So it's a good point.
Really interesting, Craig's point of view there. Right. I'm going to go on mute, and I'm going to leave you to Colin and Mark. If you've got questions, Colin, if you go first.
We'll just pick up one from YouTube. John Smith is asked, we'd be delighted if a coach came up to the Shetland after lockdown to prepare us for the NatWest Island Games in 2021 in Guernsey. Anybody interested?
We travel everywhere, Gertz, don't we?
Yeah, we could do a camp in the Shetland, can't we?
Yeah.
Be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we bring Paul? Should we bring Paul along? He normally tags along to these things, doesn't he?
We'll see how it goes first, shall we?
I'd love to go to the Shetlands, actually. Be a lovely place to go and visit and do a bit of TTS.
We literally travel everywhere. I've been to Belgium a couple of times, delivered some sessions there as well. So we're all probably open to traveling and working with different clubs and associations. Yeah.
You can stop at Glen Rossi Guesthouse on the way up, boys.
Ben Hart's asked, what age did you all start playing competitively at?
Ooh, I think I was about 9 or 10. I think I started when I was about 7. And I think I started playing club competitions and sort of county competitions, lower level, at about 9 or 10 from memory. Yeah.
Yeah, same for me. I was 10 when I started playing.
Yeah, I think I was 10 as well when I started playing local league, or started entering a few of the sort of under 11s, under 12 tournaments on the Welsh circuit. Yeah, around that sort of age group. So
yeah. I was definitely playing local league when I was at primary school. I can remember playing local league. So it's a little bit different now. Parents tend not to want the children out so late, but I was competing virtually as soon as I started playing. I was competing.
And Ben Hart also has another question. He said, what did you do before playing a competitive match to get yourself ready?
I tried lots of different things. I think I know some players have set routines. I struggled to find what it was that made me settle. And one thing I found is not looking at the draw used to ease me a little bit. If I knew who I was playing, which obviously sometimes you would, certainly if it's British League or something like that, I would find myself not worrying so much about it. But I didn't have any specific routine or rituals before a match, just to make sure that I'd eaten enough beforehand, I was hydrated and feeling good, ready to go on the court.
For me, it was more about if you had played the player before, trying to think back to points where you played well against someone, or even at venues where you'd played before, and try and think of the good things that had happened there. I think sometimes you can overthink things, but never looking at things that didn't go the way you wanted them to. Always trying to take positives out of those matches that you've had before.
yeah, for me, I used to try and just find a quiet place in a sports centre, away from things a little bit. If I was going on and playing whatever round it would be, just trying to get myself out to the hall a little bit and try and get away from kind of the distractions and people around you. So did that quite a bit, a little bit of music now and again, but it wasn't like Craig, it wasn't a kind of a set pattern always. But yeah, a couple of things that I did try and do.
Sounds good. I'm going to ask one of my own personal questions. Do you guys feel there was more pressure on you when you played, or do you feel more pressure on yourself now when you coach?
It's tough. I suppose it's in the moment, isn't it? I felt a lot of pressure when I played, certainly for my country. Certainly the last junior year where I was the oldest and the best player in the squad, I felt like I was the one that was having to bring those results. I think the way that I coach, mentally, I still play the match with the player. So I still feel that pressure tremendously. I probably hide it a little bit better these days, I think. But
do you mean, Craig, you don't throw your bat around and have a
no,
tantrum?
not anymore. Have I done that before?
He just throws their drinks bottles now.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that I feel pressure the same as when I coach. I'm invested in the match. So yeah. I
think playing, I definitely felt more pressure in team events than I did in individual events. So when you feel that your result could impact on someone else in your team, I think from a coaching perspective, it really depends on the person you're cornering. Like some players, I feel nervous when they're playing. I'm not sure what they're going to do. Other players, I can sit in the corner and totally relax, and even if they're down, you just get a different. And maybe it comes from the player. I'm not 100% sure, but definitely when I corner some players, I feel a lot more apprehensive or nervous than I do with others.
Yes, so I felt the pressure the same really when I played. I think I agree with Paul. I felt it more playing for a team event, or with obviously not wanting to let your teammates down and wanting to try and do well for your country. Felt it there, but also like Paul says, I get really nervous when I'm coaching as well. Really feel that when I obviously wanting the player I'm working with to play well, and I really feel that that nervousness and that pressure. So pretty similar for me, I would think.
got a few more questions from YouTube coming in. Shannon Brown, where's the best place you've been / played, and what was it like?
Where's the best place that I've played? The best place that I've been in terms of an event was, and you've been there as well, Colin, had to be Taipei. The event was incredible. To have that number of people watching and being involved in the event was absolutely incredible. In terms of where I've played, I think there's a few venues. I used to love playing for my club in Nodo in Belgium. We used to play in an old shed, effectively, and for the last sort of 7 or 8 years, it was a brand new venue, great venue, great atmosphere, great teammates. That's certainly up there as one of my favourite places to play.
Yeah, for me, probably the headquarters in Plymouth, when we qualified for about 3 years in a row. We qualified for the Nancy Evans Cup, which was a European knockout cup, and we had some incredible matches there. But probably the most intimidating match I ever played, we played against Bordeaux, and Matthew Sire was playing from that at the time, and we turned up at the hotel ready to the day before the match, and Matthew Sire was there, and he said to us, "Oh, there's going to be 2,500 people watching the match." We thought he was joking. You know, most we played in front of was probably 100 players. We walked in the hall and practiced, and there was no one there. And then when we were walked back in, there were about 2,500 people there watching, and that was probably the most intimidating and the most enjoyable at the same time.
Yeah, for me, best place that I've enjoyed playing. I always enjoyed playing at Safari Gardens in Cardiff. Sport Wales, absolutely awesome sports centre. I love playing there. Loved Delhi in the Commonwealth Games 2010. Really good experience there, and a good laugh with the Welsh squad. And on a coaching side, the Gold Coast was awesome, wasn't it, Cole? 2 years ago, that was a great place to play and to be part of that event. That was probably one of my highlights as a coach, being at that event. And yeah, them stand out for me.
I'll let Mark have a go now.
Gents, I'll go with a question of my own to start with. Paul, you touched upon it earlier with sort of residential camps about playing up and down, but I was wondering, in coaching like a local club where you have a beginner, intermediate, and maybe a more like the best player in the club, how do you keep everyone at that same level where they're turning up maybe one night a week, you're not seeing them again for another week, but people are developing at different levels? Just, gents, what's your thoughts on that, about how trying to keep that balance or try and keep the group going?
Yeah, my groups. I've got about 35 children that play at our club. We were at about 45 at one point, but this season we were at about 35 players. But what I tend to do is group, because we have 2 sessions a day. We tend to have the younger players coming in early, maybe 4 o'clock until 6 o'clock, and then the older players come in at 6 to 9. So they are streamed to a certain degree. But I always try and get them with someone similar, or maybe even on style. It may be that the style of play that they need to train against is different. But as well as the training, they feed each other a lot of multi-ball, and sometimes that takes away the difference in level. So some of the drills we'll do maybe an hour of multi-ball. I can easily put maybe a player who's maybe not as good as another, maybe a really good multi-ball feeder. And I think it's great for the children to learn to feed it early as well anyway. So I do stream them, but they'll always play with all the players in the group, and they know that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most difficult areas to manage. I think that's something that we will always battle with on our camps, Steve, as well. I'm sure you'll agree. It's always trying to match levels up. I think the hardest thing is trying to get people to understand that it's essential to be able to play up and down, and that there's benefit from that. From a tournament standpoint, you have to be able to beat people that aren't as good as you. You have to learn how to do that. I think setting goals is a good way of leveling it. So if you've got a better player feeding for a player, just giving them a little whisper and saying, look, you're allowed to miss 5 times in the next 5 minutes, so that they've just got something to work on. They're not just stood there blocking and thinking, oh, why am I playing with this person? They've got an agenda. Equally rewarding, good attitude, turning up on time, punctuality, whatever it may be, to say, you've done this, so therefore you can move up and play with these people, and so on. I think there's different ways of doing it. Not one way will always work, but I think having that variety and those different things to draw upon helps make it easier at times. Yeah.
I think when you're getting players like what Craig was saying there about at Steve and Craig's camps, sometimes you're getting different players all the time that are coming to your camps. Whereas when it's in a club environment, those better players that you've got have actually started at that club when they weren't the best players, and they've had someone better than them feeding them. So I think they do tend to understand that there is a certain amount of give and take as well. And to understand that they can, you can set a drill that, okay, I'm not on Craig's level now, but I could set a drill that I could be a better player than Craig. Maybe he's restricted where he can put the ball, but I can put the ball anywhere. So there are ways you can structure your drills that the players don't know it, but you're making it more in favour of the slightly weaker player over the stronger player.
I think that's setting the culture in the club as well, though, Paul, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if those young players have seen the better players giving back from a young age, then they'll know that that's the way to do things. If that didn't happen at a young age, then that's unlikely to happen. So I think, setting that culture early on is important too.
And I think that's easier in a club environment than it is in maybe a national environment where players are coming in from everywhere.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, isn't it? Have different systems, like Craig says, on our camps. We have the coloured system, don't we? We spend a lot of time for not only my camps but national level planning who's gonna, the practice partners, and setting that up and trying to get as fair as possible. That's one thing I think we always try and do as coaches, is make it as fair as possible and respect everyone that comes into the hall as best we can. At a community level, at my local clubs up here, I ask some of the better players to give 10 minutes or 15 minutes back per session, where they knock with someone, not necessarily a kid, but even an adult that's weaker than them. So that sort of creates that atmosphere that the boys are talking about, sets a kind of good ethos and good kind of standards early. In the national set, we're lucky we have a lot of practice partners come in to help us, and I spend a lot of time working out who's going to be knocking with the practice partners and organising that, and trying over the weekend, over the last 4 that we've done in Largs, everyone has had an opportunity to play with practice partners and to try and make it fair. I try and sell that idea that you only get sometimes rewarded with the good knocks if you work hard and you've got a good attitude yourself and you're willing to, and you deserve it. I think that's important as well. Why should this practice partner who's given up their time for free go on with someone who's got a poor attitude and not training hard? So I try and sell that to the players, and like Paul said, I think it's easy to get that culture right in a club. National level is more tricky and takes more work, especially when you're seeing the guys at the squad 5 times a year or something, like I am in Scotland. But still really important that we get them values right, and something that we need to work on here.
Brilliant. Go to a question from Colin Green about table tennis analysis sheets, where you record points won, errors, etc. He's trying to get one himself, or trying to incorporate one for his own coaching. What's your guys' thoughts on that? Have you make up your own, or have you used one from another coach?
Yeah, there's quite a few around, and I think since I've really used them, I'm sure there's a load more available these days. The one that I used to use for my work was Dartfish Easy Tag. You could set the grids up and divide the table up, if you like, into as many sections as you wish, either into backhand, forehand, or deep into forehand, deep into backhand, short, and so on. And as you're watching a match, you literally tap the section that is relevant. So if someone's lost the point on their backhand, you tap the backhand part, and that will log that as a mistake, or where someone's won a point, or depending on what you're recording. So that was quite useful. You could even use that, live whilst you're talking to the player in the corner, or it could be a tool that you could use after the match to see where you were winning points or losing points. For me, it doesn't have to be that complex either. For me, pen and paper can be just as useful. There's no reason why you couldn't draw a table out on a notepad and just do a little tally system. So it doesn't have to be complex with different apps as well. So that's the two ways that I've done it in the past.
Paul, do you want to go? I mean,
yeah, I get the players to look at videos of their matches. I don't tag it as deeply as Craig does, but I do get the players to look back through their matches, to watch them, to see where they win and lose points. I know we had Dartfish for a while where we were regional coaches, but it is time consuming to do that tagging. And sometimes it's nice for the players, you know, as a coach, I wouldn't have time to go through and analyze everybody's matches when you've got 20, 30 players or, you know, if we go to a 4-star, sometimes we've got 12 to 14 players. It would be impossible for me to have the time to go through all those matches, but putting the responsibility back on the players to see where they win and lose points. And then it gives them some ownership as well. You know, we do quite a lot in our sessions of the players will set their own drills on strengths and weaknesses. So them watching their matches back and getting a feel for where they win and lose points is really important. But I don't actually use any paper form of tagging it.
yeah, I mean, I remember when we worked for England, we were all given the Dartfish software, weren't we, and a video camera, and we were actively encouraged to use it. Probably something, to be honest, personally, I haven't done enough with. Probably could explore it a little bit more. When I'm with my lecturing, I talk about it a lot, and I've used another one's called Coach's Eye, which is a really, really good one, which has got an app as well, and that does a similar platform to Dartfish and stuff as well. But yeah, not used it probably enough. But yeah, I agree with Craig as well. There's a lot of value in still just writing this stuff down and reflecting on it, and directly after matches, and making that part of that learning process. But definitely, you know, I use video a lot in my sessions. You know, straight away in training, I'll ask players to go film some drills, and instantly I'll ask them to, especially my one-to-ones, I'll ask them to look back at it and talk me through what they're noticing within their body position or their technique. So I use video a lot, but the notational analysis stuff, like Paul says, is very time-consuming and probably an area that is maybe a little bit neglected for other areas that we maybe think we need to prioritize, especially when we're not, you know, full time and working with such large groups of players. It's very time-consuming.
Yeah,
I think quite a few years ago, England had a guy called Chris Loxton who did a lot of their analysis for them. And I sat down with Chris once, and it was incredibly complicated because with a game like table tennis, it comes down to who your opponent is as well. So maybe if I'm playing against Steve, my backhand looks really good, but when I play against Craig, my backhand doesn't look so good. So the level of your opponent can have a big impact on how that score comes out. So that it's not just tagging that you miss so many shots with your backhand or so many shots with your forehand, but the level of the opponent has to be factored into that as well.
Just to quickly clarify on that, sorry, just very quickly, that there's a bit of confusion as well with those systems. Dartfish is a video analysis tool, which can be really complex and tough to track, and it's something you have to practice using. And Dartfish Easy Tag is a really simple app that allows you to draw grids out and log basic information. It doesn't have to be complex. So I suppose what I'm saying is don't be put off too much by it being overcomplicated. You can make it very simple, and it's the Dartfish Easy Tag that can be quite simple. So it's worth trying and playing around with.
Yeah, we've got loads of questions on YouTube, but I just want a final bit on this one. I mean, you sort of touched on it, all you guys, in your answers, where do you feel that as players playing to a high level that you need your player to take responsibility of their own game? So it's fine with younger players trying to make it interesting, but you feel like, Steve, from your point of view, of maybe not getting involved in it because you need players at advanced level rather than tagging it, that actually I'm going to take responsibility, and you're trying to put emphasis onto them?
Yeah, do you know what, on that, Mark, the best advice anyone ever gave me as a coach is try and make yourself redundant as a coach in a way. You know, try and teach your player to have all the skills where they're not going to rely on you. You know, they're not, you can't play for them. And I think that's a good message that I kind of learned as I got older, and that changed my approach to coaching over the years as well. I was, maybe when I was a younger coach, I was very much wanting players to be dependent on me, and I was but then as I got older and developed and became more mature, that when I had this bit of advice, I started thinking, I need to, make sure that my players have got all the skills, the knowledge, and the ability to go out and perform for themselves and take responsibility, be independent for their training and in their competitions, and be more of a guardian and a kind of a guide for them, and a mentoring side of things as well as they progress. That only happens at a certain level. At a younger age, you need to get all the other aspects right. But that's my view.
So to sum up, the best advice I was given: the good coach gives the player the roots to grow and the wings to fly. Does that sum it all up? Probably. Okay, now what I would like to do, before, I know we've got loads of questions, but you've all been coached, and I'd like to know who coached you, who was your paternal coach, and have they influenced you in any way on your coaching style or to become a coach? Okay, same order, Craig first.
So my first coach was a guy called Tony Carey, who was just a local coach, had a decent club running in Wellington. He got me started. He got me interested. He kept my interest. He kept me motivated. So he's the reason for starting down this path, for sure. I think the guy that took me to the next level is on this panel, is Paul Whiting. So I, from about age 11 or 12, Paul?
12, I think it was, Craig.
Yeah, for about from 12 to 16, I had one-to-ones with Paul twice a week. Used to travel 60 miles each way to go and see Paul. He added a lot of quality to my game. As he said, in those sort of days, he was an active practice partner. So he gave me good quality on the table, but also gave me a lot of good knowledge as well. Helped me embrace my uniqueness in my game. I remember us practicing wigglies under the table, trying to get the ball to move in different ways. Paul was quite good at that, and he saw that I was able to do that. And we used to practice things like that, not all the time, but that certainly formed part of my game, having this variability when I played. And I think that has absolutely carried through to my coaching. It's incredibly important to have the basics right and to have a good foundation. But when I see something in someone, I'm happy to go with those unique skills and see if we can develop a strength out of those things that are slightly different as well. So, yeah, Paul's had a big influence on my game as a player and in my coaching career as well.
Paul, are we sticking to the same lineup, or is it?
Yeah, same lineup. Yeah.
Okay, so I started at primary school with a guy called Tommy Anson, who was the teacher in my primary school, and he was a Division 1 local league player. So he sort of got me started, and then I progressed once I started going to coaching sessions to a guy called Frank Hatton. Frank was a coach in Plymouth at the time, and I probably worked with Frank until I was about 14 or 15, and then Frank stopped coaching. But I think at that, when I was playing, regional coaching was quite good. You, Dave, used to come down to do regional coaching. We used to have Don Parker as well. And one of the big things about the coaching then is you could still be coached when you were a senior. Yeah. So I remember you, Dave, taking me to a camp on the Isle of Wight to Cole Preen's dad's factory. And I was working at the time. I took time off work to go to a training camp. Yeah. Well, I wasn't national team level, but there were so many opportunities for players past their junior years to still get coaching. And so that sort of, I think that's a really important thing. But those were the two main people who had an impact on me. Definitely playing. I'm not necessarily saying as a coach, but definitely on my love of the game.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, for me, my dad started. Have I gone?
Your video's gone, but we can
Oh.
hear you, Steve.
Okay, that's fine then. Yeah, my dad started me playing when I was 8 years old, so he takes a lot of the credit for getting me into the sport and encouraged me to play. I always remember him saying you need to be able to bounce the ball on the bat 100 times before I'll take you to the local table tennis club, which I managed to eventually do, and went to a local club in Swansea, and then he passed me over then to the coaches there, and it was a guy called Jeff Saunders who ran the sessions there and had a really big influence on me. At that age, very disciplined coach, set really good standards, and I kind of molded myself as a coach. Looking back on the way I coach now is very similar to him, and also to them when he passed me over to Alan Griffiths, who was a national coach back then, and I used to spend 2 nights a week, or we are up in Cardiff at the National Centre with Alan Griffiths. So as a player, I was used to that style of coaching, very set good standards in the hall, controlled the hall, created an atmosphere where everyone was prepared to work hard for him, and did it in a kind of a subtle way. And so I'd say they had the biggest influence on me as a player and a coach. Looking back as a coach now, they had a big influence.
Okay, well, I'm actually going to ask that question to Colin and Matt. They're both coaches. I say, Colin, hopefully not too much, but as your own coach, Colin, and I'll ask Colin first, then Mark, as your own coach, did they influence you to become a coach? And yeah.
Well, I started off at Murrayfield, and like Stephen, similar story. I remember it was my brother that played, and Lindsay Muir made me hit a ball in the bat 10 times before I could join the club first. And yeah, I definitely use a lot that I learned from Lindsay and at Murrayfield early days, and I still use a lot as well. A lot of their ethos was just to enjoy the sport and have fun. And I definitely try and get that across my sessions as well. And yeah, they enjoyed coaching and they had a good time coaching, and it made me think that I wanted to coach as well and give something back to the game.
Good answer. Mark?
For me, when I started playing table tennis, we had a small group in Perth, and we've touched upon it before on the show, is that my dad, who was the director of coaching, brought coaches from other areas, and that was my development. Rather than being in a group and playing, it was all about one-to-ones, but we were quite lucky in a group where it was myself, Gavin Rungay, Gillian Edwards, where we all played with each other. But otherwise, it was more one-to-one sessions brought on my development. But certainly when I started, like most people, it was a group session, and then it was all about where it was going to take from there. And that's my question earlier about that advanced level and immediate. So many people start playing table tennis, get a talent, and they leave again. And that was probably something when I was younger. There were so many people that came to the club, but you're only left with about 4 or 5 going forward.
Questions tonight. So, Colin, do you want to get a couple of questions?
Yeah, so a question from Philip Walker. If you could play against anyone in the world, who would it be and why?
Oh, anyone?
Yeah, anyone.
Kevin Bedell.
Well, to get an easy win.
Yeah, guaranteed.
You've played him, haven't you? You've played him.
That's what I would play him. If I could play anyone, that's who I'd play.
I don't know. I've unofficially played against Jano Vevoldner in a tournament in London. We were all having a few beers as well, so it wasn't a dead serious match. So I've managed to play him. He would certainly be top of my list.
That's the one I coached you in, Craig, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. For 1 point, yeah. I suppose, yeah, someone like Timo Boll would be up there, or Samsonov to play against those guys. You see them a lot. We've seen them over the years. It looks easy, doesn't it? It looks easy to play them. So I'd like to test it and see if it is or not.
Yeah, I think apologies if I've lost. I could only see a frozen Paul screen right now, so apologies for that. But if my screen's frozen, but I would like to play someone like Samsonov, I think, as well, because he seems like a nice guy and he might let me get into some rallies rather than being blasted off the table by a Marlon or someone who's really powerful. He might give me a few chances to have some nice rallies. So I'd love to play against Samsonov, and I also got a lot of respect for Samsonov as a player because I love the way he plays, and he's got such a nice feeling of the ball and good control. Not necessarily the most powerful, but yeah, really good to watch, I think.
Next question from YouTube.
Has everybody answered that?
I think.
Colin, let's get Colin. Who would you like to play against? And then I'm going to ask Mark.
Yeah, I think Timo Boll's up there. Just the legend of the game. One of my idols, and achieved so much. And I mean, there's so much variation in his game. I don't think I'd enjoy it, but I think I'd like to play him. Definitely.
Mark?
Very easy. Janovi Waldner, without a shadow of a doubt. Still look at his videos now on YouTube. Legend. But yeah, I'd love to have a game against him.
Craig didn't mention it here, but I'll give him a shout out because Craig did beat Janovi Waldner in that East London pub 2-1, or was it one set, Craig, or best of three?
2-1.
2-1. Craig beat him in a best of three match, and Craig was playing in his jeans. Obviously, Fowler had an amazing career, but still a little bit of a highlight for Craig. Had a good laugh
If
as
that's
well.
the case, I take it back. Timo Boll. If Craig, Timo Boll. Not having that.
Craig Bryant then, Mark.
I played against Craig a long time ago. I don't know if he remembers, but yeah, sort of battles in Junior British League. But no, I'll go with Timo Boll or Janovi Waldner. Sorry, Craig.
Oh yeah, world champion in '79. I'd go for finalist in '77, and then he won it twice. Perfect player, absolutely perfect. Hardly moved, very short strokes, hit the ball at the top of the bounds, footwork outstanding. Yeah. Okay, right. I think we've got so many questions. We better keep going on the questions. Who's going to, Mark? Do you want to read one out?
Yeah, we have a question from Alad Howell.
Oh God.
I think some of you might know. Basically, what makes a good coach? I don't know who he's referring to after this. He says he's asked him, I don't know who that is, what he thinks makes a good coach, but I haven't heard back yet. So what makes a good coach, gents?
Well, I'll mirror what I said. This was the question we had when we were on the Table Tennis England one. So for me, it's someone that's personable, someone that's approachable, and someone that cares about the game and who they're working with. It doesn't matter so much about what you know, but if you're willing to help someone, then for me they're the key qualities that makes a good coach. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I think reliability. You know, when you're running sessions day in, day out, the children and the parents who are bringing the children, knowing that you're going to be there, make sure that you're delivering good sessions to them. Make sure that the children really know you care about their development and not just development as players, but development as people as well.
Yeah.
So someone who's caring and someone who's dependable.
Yeah, I think I agree with Paul on that as well. Really important to have that relationship with a player where they can rely on you to show that you really care for them. I think another one is having a good awareness as a coach, knowing when in the training hall there's a player that maybe you can come down on a little bit harder to improve their standards, or maybe when a player's looking a bit down and you can find ways to motivate them as well. So good awareness and intervening at the right times, and just the all-round package. You know, you need to be good tactically, technically, you know, being able to understand how players' mind works and when you can step in and try and get the best out of them and all, you know, having that kind of all-round package. It's okay to be stronger at some areas. Maybe you're a better technical coach and a tactical coach is okay that, but you need a little bit of everything to really perform well as a coach, I think.
if I can add to that, I'd say be there for your players when things aren't going well. It's ever so easy to say, well done, Colin, you're the British champion, the Scottish champion, you're the Edinburgh champion. But when he's had a bad tournament in Alicante, then you've got to be there for them as well. You know, so that would be my advice. You know, be there for the player all the time, because players know, you know, so be there for them at all times. Right, next question. Colin, do you want to, there's loads on the screen today, I think. Is there any more?
Yeah, Ben Hart with another question. He says, what do you look for like in a player?
What do you look for in a player?
Yeah, as a coach.
first of all, that they want to be there. And that sounds fairly obvious, but there's lots of players that don't want to be there. Some get dropped off to, because the parents have got something to do or somewhere to be, or they want them to be active. So it's a privilege sometimes to work with players that are motivated to be there. Physically in their game, I'm just trying to find, first of all, what I can see as a strength. And that could be anything from a particular shot, or their consistency, or they've got some power, or they've got a bit of flair for service, and then start to direct the coaching in and around the strengths that I see. So I don't look for a particular strength, but just, what is their strength and how can I make them better? And for me, that's going to help them keep coming back to the club or back for one-to-ones and keep them involved in the game more.
Yeah, I think for me, it's someone who loves table tennis. That's where going away with the children sometimes and having that downtime in the evening, like Craig was saying, you get to know the ones who really love table tennis. There's lots of children that come and play that are brought there to play, but there'll be a few within that who really they're almost like table tennis geeks. They know everything about it. They know all the new rubbers, they know all the blades, they know all the players. So just talking to them and finding out the ones who are actually interested in table tennis, the whole package. Because you can change anything with coaching. If someone wants to be good at something, and they really want to be good at it, you can help them to develop into a good player. But if they don't want to be a good player, it doesn't matter what strengths they've got, they'll never be there. So someone who's got a real love for the game and a passion for the game, for me, is really important. Yes,
same for me. Seeing a youngster who's really bubbly around the hole, really good energy, enthusiastic about playing. As Paul said, absolutely loves it. Also, look for players that are turning up every week, turning up early. Sometimes seeing the players before a training session, just on the table having a go, messing around, just wanting to get on there and play as much as they can, and trying to get as much opportunities. Every week they're reliable. They come each week, not necessarily big personality, maybe just someone who's maybe quiet but gets about their business very subtly and goes under the radar. Maybe sometimes I look for them type players who are just kind of self-disciplined and just trying to make their own way, get better each week and not trying to show off or stand out too much in a way. So yeah, it's about trying to pick up on them kind of little personalities and traits that you can see in players, and it's kind of what I'm looking for.
Brilliant. It's the willingness to learn, if I was to answer that. Right, Colin, have you got what you'd like it where in your short time as a coach that what do you...
Sorry, what was that, Dave?
The same question the boys had.
Yeah, I think hard workers. I'm a hard worker myself, and I think I get along with players that really want to put the effort in, and as the guy said, have the passion for the sport. And yeah, they want to learn, they want to work hard. They're not, as Craig said, just there because they want to exercise. They really want to improve and progress in the game. And I think a coach and a player can bounce off each other if they have that in common. So yeah, I look for hard workers and people passionate for the sport as well.
Mark?
I mean, just exactly what the guys have said, to be honest. I think it's just that passion and love for the game, but also it's trying to actually understand that not everyone's going to be an international table tennis player.
Yeah.
There's so many of us that play the game for fun. That's where I am now. But it's about trying to get the best out of it. And if you're a player and coaching or a player turning up and they've got that enthusiasm, it doesn't matter if they're not going to be the best. And that's something I would probably take from learning when I was young as a coach. When I came out of juniors playing for Scotland, I was too impatient as a coach. I wanted to coach players and get them to a level quicker because I probably found at an age where immaturity, where I found it boring. And I think going back to what a decent coach is, that basically patience. But as a player, I probably done a disservice to the players that were keen to play because I maybe didn't give them all as a coach. So I think it's that buy-in from both. But certainly as a player, it's just that love for the game, really. And that's what you're going to look out for.
And I just, on that, Mark, I think that's a really important point. I think looking back, me as a coach, I was probably a bit too much early doors as a young coach, elite driven, and just focus on kind of the better ones. And I think kind of missed out with some players I worked with back in the day. That's kind of bigger picture that comes with it, and all the values and the sort of life skills that you can teach through sport. And that's become a lot more important to me as I've got older and work with more players now. Obviously, I'm still elite driven and want players to do really well, but that other things that sport can help with in your lives, like you said, really just really important, I think. So really good point.
I think that's a maturity thing as well, Steve, though, isn't it? I think when you're a young coach, it's a new career for you. You want to be successful in your career, and then as you want the players to have results so that your coaching looks good as well. And I think as you get older, you start to realize that you're there to try and help people get better and to help people try and fulfill their potential, not to get results for you. You're just trying to do the best you can do. But I think that's just part of the journey as a young coach, isn't it?
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. It was Peter Simpson, one of my gurus, really, who said, is it the player that makes the coach, or is it the coach that makes the player, or the player that makes the coach in some ways? And I used to run a centre of excellence at Chesington. And now I'm sure Craig will know Darren Blake. Well, yeah, we know Darren Blake.
I know Darren, yeah.
Yeah, well, his brother Jason was at the Centre of Excellence. And I was training some coaches at the time, and there was 8 coaches there, Centre of Excellence, Jason Blake, lots of other good players there. And in walked Darren Blake in his cricket whites. He'd just come from a cricket match. And I said to these coaches, do you want to be a good coach? But they was all learning, and they all said, oh yeah. I said, coach that boy there. Who's that? I said, well, his name's Darren Blake. Why? I said, well, he'll play for England. I said, whoever coaches him, he'll play for England, but then you'll get the credit for it. Anyway, next question.
The question from Ketamaskaya, well, I don't know if I pronounced that correct, but I'll give it a go. Basically, how do you integrate players with disabilities into your session?
Is that Keta from Plymouth?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Or is it Kev?
Keva Mishka.
Yeah. I've not worked with too many disabled players, not in my sessions anyway. One-to-ones, I've had a few. Again, my view's no different, I suppose. I'm still looking for what their strengths are, how I could see their game develop, how you can start to build the game around those strengths. So in terms of my approach of how I would coach them, I don't think it would be different at all. So although you'd have to consider maybe some areas that they'd struggle with more, the same concept of coaching for me doesn't change there.
I've worked quite a lot with two players with a disability. Dave Wetherall was the first one that I worked with from when Dave was quite young. He still comes to sessions at our club now, and a little bit like Craig said, really, I don't look at what he can't do. I look at what he can do. So that's the first thing is I find out what he can do and what can make him strong as a player. But also you have to look at the category that the player's in, and give them. So when you're looking at training partners, maybe for Dave, practicing with Craig isn't good practice for him. Maybe a little bit of time with Craig, but maybe against a player who plays maybe with long pimples, a combination bat, that he's going to face a lot in his category. His training against them is more important. I remember before he went to his first Paralympic, I watched some videos with him of the players that he had to play, and most of them were combination bat players, and I tried to emulate their style against him. So instead of me playing two sheets of reverse against him and playing matches against him, I played with a combination bat and tried to play a similar style to what they played. But as for integrating them into the session, they do the same things as everyone else, or their individual drills might be different, but they'll do the same thing. But you obviously have to take into consideration the physical side of it, what they can and can't do in the physical side. So when you're doing warm-ups, when you're doing physical training, maybe there's some things that they have to do slightly differently. but it all comes into the planning of your session.
Yeah, it was. Sorry.
Can I just? I'll just let you come in. You made some excellent points there, Paul. Last week, Mark and I did a session for the Shetlands, and that question about playing against pimples came up. That all their practice is against reverse rubber, and they go to the Island Games, and everybody's got funny bats. And but yeah, so exactly the same point you was making. So, Stephen, apologise for interrupting you.
No problem. Yeah, I was quite lucky. I had good exposure to working with disabilities quite early. As I said earlier, my first person that I coached had a standing disability, and then from there I worked a lot with the Welsh disability players, wheelchair players, a lot of wheelchair players. Rob Davis, Sarah Head, Jim Monkley was running the Welsh setup back then, and that's helped me have a good understanding. And my local club, the Highland Table Tennis Club, we have 2 wheelchair players that come to our sessions as well now, every week on a Tuesday, and I work with one of them one-to-one as well. And just like Craig and Paul said, just try and integrate them as normal. And it's actually one of the modules I teach at a University of Highlands and Islands, inclusive sports. And I know you had Martin Perry on last week. He's what I put his video up of the one he did at Drumchapel for Sports Scotland. I use that in my classes when I'm teaching inclusive sports. And Ewan McLaughlin, who I've seen commented on this as well, both of them have been involved in national squads, able-bodied national squads, and have been part of that as any other player.
Just going back to what you were saying, Dave, about playing against different sorts of materials. I'm quite lucky at the club we're at in Plymouth. Quite a lot of the older members of the club who maybe play with short pimples or medium pimples or anti-spin, they'll come and spar against the children, and they'll play against them when they're really young. So they just get used to playing it. They don't see it as a fear when they play against short pimples or long pimples. It's just another sheet of rubber, So I think getting them used to playing against it early on is really important. I played, when I started playing, a lot of the players in the local league played with a hard bat, and the reaction of a hard bat was exactly the same as the reaction of long pimples. So once you got used to playing against that, you didn't have a fear of playing it. So I think getting them used to playing against those sorts of things early on is really important.
That's actually a really good point, Paul, because that came up when we were discussing it with the Shetland guys. About when I was younger and other players, where we don't have a clue what to do against sort of combination bat players. At a younger age, you're so used to playing against conventional rubbers, and you go to a tournament. I don't know if Craig and Stephen remember a player from Ireland, Barry Gallagher, sort of age groups, but he played with anti-loop on both sides. We used to get quite high up in the British schools because no one had a clue how to play against them, apart from English players. Because I think that maybe philosophy, Paul, was that actually at a young age they knew how to play against it, but certainly players in Scotland, and I don't know how Wales, but certainly struggled against that. So it's great advice of certainly that club and bringing these players along, because it certainly helped players in Scotland, because we are a bit clueless until we get a bit stronger about how to play against them.
Again, for the better juniors at the club, I sometimes I'll use 2 sheets the same colour, so pimples and smooth, but the same colour. So they've really got to watch and they've really got to read. So it improves their reading and their understanding of the ball.
I think it's good for them to play with it as well.
European Championship.
Pardon?
Is that not how John Hilton won his European Championship?
Well.
Right, we're just going to go on is with you're all players, you're all player coaches. I want to know when you said to yourself, I am now a coach more than a player, but I'm going to let the bronze medalist go first in Stephen. I'll let the silver go last. Okay, Stephen?
Yeah, you say bronze medalist, Dave. You say bronze medalist, but I can't take a lot of credit for that bronze medal. That was the Jenkins brothers and Adam Robertson. I think I played 1 match against Singapore, but I have got a bronze medal in my house. Back in my parents' house, I've got a bronze medal in Swansea, which they're looking after for me. But yeah,
that's right.
Wanted to give them a good shout out.
If you turn the medal around, Stephen, if you turn that medal around, it doesn't say I didn't play. It just says Stephen bronze medal.
Yeah, that's true. I'd like to think I maybe supported them pretty well and give them good training before it, or started even thinking about coaching there. But yeah, I was thinking about coaching very young, Dave. like I said, I started coaching and playing from 16 years old. Started to try and.
When did coaching take over from playing? I mean,
yeah, young. It took over young, Dave. Yeah, I would say about 18 years old, I started to think I was going down the coaching path. I was still playing, but I absolutely loved coaching. I sort of took to it really quickly, and just loved even being in group sessions, leading group sessions from a very young age. And I think even at as young as 18, I saw myself as probably more of a coach than I did a player, looking back.
Yeah. Paul, when did, you know, as you had quite a long playing career, and there must have been, again, a point where you said to yourself, actually, I am now a coach more than I am a player.
Yeah, I would say probably when I started to run group sessions.
Yeah.
And I wasn't necessarily involved in the playing in those sessions. I felt more of a coach than a player. When I was doing one-to-ones, I still really felt like a training partner more than the coach. Because obviously the playing ability for the players was as important as any information I could give them. But I would say I started to feel a coach when I started to run group sessions for the Plymouth League.
Craig?
I think for me, it was a bit of a combination, I think, of when my playing levels started to plateau a little bit and perhaps just started to play tournaments for the sake of playing tournaments rather than trying to win titles and earn a little bit of money from it, as well as when I started to coach for England. So we were in a position where we were regional coaches, but some of us occasionally coached for England as well. And I suppose it was just a bit of a thought process that this is getting a little bit more serious and there's a bit of a career path ahead of me. So yeah, sort of late 20s, I think that started to happen for me.
Interesting. Right, okay, now again, question time. Colin, have you got a question for the boys?
Yeah, so Ewan McLaughlin's got a question from YouTube. How important is applying scientific coaching theories in your delivery? How do you achieve this and how do you measure its effectiveness and impact in your session or sessions?
Oh, that's a tough question. I would say it would depend on the player, their understanding, how they take in knowledge. Some things you need to keep very simple and give simple analogies for people. I do lots of service sessions, and I remember running one in Belgium, and there was a scientist that was in the session, and he wanted to understand how a side spin serve turned into topspin. He couldn't understand it, and I was having to explain, and I don't profess to be scientific myself, but just to explain that when you impart side spin and a little bit of topspin combined with momentum, the ball changes from side spin, connects with a table, and then it's going to transition into topspin. And that's the reason why the ball bends first and then straightens afterwards. And then he started to understand how the effect was created on the ball. Some people like to know that helps some people, that can confuse some people. So again, I think it comes back to what Steve said. It's knowing what to deliver and how to deliver it to those varied players that you're working with.
Yeah, I agree with Craig. It really depends on the person that you're working with. Some you can totally confuse. It's a bit like saying, how can a side spin backspin serve move more sideways than a topspin side spin serve? Sometimes you don't have to overthink it. You just have to know that that's what happens. It's a little bit like long pimples. If I play a topspin to long pimples, it comes back with backspin. If I play a backspin, it comes back with topspin. I don't always have to know exactly how that happens. I just need to know that happens. And that really does depend on the player you're working with. Some people can really get it quickly. Others, you're better off just letting them, this is what happens, so you play that ball.
Yeah. You need to know how to drive a car. You don't need to know how it works all the time, do you?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Ewan's a really intelligent boy. I know he's just done his masters or on the verge of finishing it. So it's a really important one because as a coach, you don't want to overcomplicate it for your player. It's all well and good doing research and doing a lot of reading and looking at different theories, but if you can't get that message across to your player clearly, without trying to make yourself sound too clever or overload a player, like the boys have said, then it doesn't matter what you know if you can't deliver it in a subtle and a clever way that they'll understand. I do a bit of reading, obviously a lecturer, so do a lot of the theory stuff, and that my main message to my students there is, how are you going to do that? How are you going to make this, what you've learned here, maybe around sort of the growth mindset and the stuff Matthew Syed talks about, how are you going to transfer that into your coaching? And how are you going to, how's that going to come across, and how are you going to make sure that's simplistic for the person you're coaching within that session? And I find it all really interesting, that stuff, and it's not an easy answer, but it is about knowing the people you work with and have an understanding of the group and all the rest of it. And yeah, I agree with what the boys have said there, but it's a real fine art getting that balance right between learning and then implementing that in your coaching.
I guess one of the things to remember is, again, you've always said it, it's knowing how people learn. And when I've used to train coaches, I used to say teaching and learning are not directly related. Just because you've taught something, it doesn't necessarily mean it's been learned. So it's knowing how people learn. But also, just give you one analogy, is when Karen Wick, probably none of you remember Karen, but she was a Commonwealth gold medalist, and she was brilliant against chop. I mean, brilliant against chop. And I made the mistake of asking her to explain the theory of long pimples in a coaching session. She didn't have a clue. She could just play against it. She didn't know the theory of it. She didn't realise, as Paul said, it came back topspin from backspin, and she didn't realise how it skids on the pimples, but she just had this touch and played it. And Des is, you've all worked with Des, very similar. He can just read the ball, play the ball without needing to know the science of it. Right, it's question time again. Colin, have you got one of your own? You keep reading out the ones from the group. I know we've got a brilliant response tonight.
Yeah, I've got one of my own. What were your main goals when coming into coaching, and have you achieved them? And then have you got any future goals for your coaching?
Again, I was fairly young when I started on the coaching pathway, and I kind of just followed the pathway that was set in front of me, really. I was a regional coach. I was running various squads. An opportunity arose to get involved in some of the national stuff. I absolutely loved that. That was probably the highlight of my career so far, was working with teams regularly and taking them to trips and getting to know them and progressing them and working at that elite level. I really enjoyed. We had a restructure and my job changed, and I was no longer involved in that. And I suppose since then, I've always wanted to work towards getting that back and start progressing my career with the national squads again. So I suppose my thought process is in that at the moment. I would like to get back. I'm working with some of the youth squads in the training environment. So hopefully that will continue, and hopefully some of the more international trips and competitions and things will follow from that as well. But we'll see. That's my goal, but I can't control that at the moment. So we'll see what happens.
You were selected as the women's coach recently, Craig, for England, right?
That's right. Yeah, this coronavirus has got in the way of it, unfortunately. So yeah, I was taking the women's team to the World Championships, which has been postponed. But again, no set plans from what's going to happen yet. So we'll see how that develops. But
yeah, my goals really, I've not set myself goals as a coach, but it's more about the players for me, what the goals that the players want, and trying to help them reach their goals. So, every player that comes into the hall will probably have a slightly different level they can get to, or a slightly different thing that they want from the game. Some just want to enjoy the game, some want to play local league, some want to play national tournaments. So getting them to be able to achieve what they want is probably more important than me achieving what I want. I've worked, like Craig said, I've worked national level. I've worked with Pitchford when he was younger, Darius when he was a senior at the Six Nations, but none of it tops working in the club day in, day out with the players that you know from when they're 7 or 8 years old up until they're 17, 18, playing hopefully at a very good level, or a level that they want to attain. So really the goals aren't about me, it's about what the players want and trying to help them to get what they can get out of the sport. And hopefully, we do get a drop off in table tennis, but hopefully try and keep those players involved in the sport.
Yes, same for me. I agree with Paul. When I was a younger coach in Wales, my main kind of drive was to get players playing for Wales and winning sort of national titles for their age group. And there is nothing more rewarding if a player has come into the hall for the first time and picked the bat up, in one of your sessions, and then you've seen them and helped them and guided them along that journey. And that was my goal quite early on as a coach. And when I went to England, working there on a larger scale of an East England regional coach at the time, it was about setting up good pathways for players, making sure that everyone had good access to training, good opportunities to access good clubs, and then the goals came a bit more tailored in that regard. And now up here, it's gone back to, similar to Paul, every player I work with one-to-one or within that group session, and I work with all different abilities. Inverness is not by no means one of the biggest or got the best players in Scotland, so working with all kinds of ability levels, ages, and just trying to give my best to any single player that comes into the hall with me. And like I said, I worked with Colin and national level players, and will give my best to them and getting to help them individuals as best I can, I suppose, and on their journey, whatever that might be, whether that's just playing for fun or playing to play for Scotland.
Right, I've got one question, which will probably take a couple of minutes from each of you. So Matt, Mark or Colin, is there anything on YouTube that would be a quick answer? Unfortunately, we won't have time to answer a question with a long answer, but is there anything that looks there that the boys can answer quickly?
I mean, there's a question from Alatau, which I find quite rude, about do bald players make the best coaches? And that's a bit rude.
The answer is yes. That was a quick one.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, easy one. But no, apart from that, Dave, I think we covered a lot of those questions there. We've loads of questions from as always.
Okay, I'm going to start with Stephen this time. I'll put him up the ranking order, as I've got to live with him rather than the other two. Let's, again, knowing your coaches, put Steve number one, make him feel good for the last question. What advice, Stephen, would you give to anyone coming into coaching?
Give it a go. Be prepared to learn. Be prepared to keep trying to challenge your own practice. I know I started to do that later on in my career. I kind of thought I knew it all earlier on, and now I'm more open to trying to look back and reflect and sort of analyze my own coaching to try and improve. But just give it a go, and don't be scared to put yourself out there, volunteer for trips, and try and get involved in and just go and observe other coaches. I think I learned more from maybe observing other coaches than I did maybe for qualifications in a way. So just working with a team of coaches and trying to learn from everyone that you come across.
Paul?
First thing I'll say is don't do it for money. Do it because you actually love coaching. That there's lots of people who you can make money in coaching, but if you don't enjoy it, you end up clock watching and you don't give the best to the players. So first thing I would say is do it because you actually love coaching. Second thing, when you're working with big groups of players, parents become involved in it as well. So always trying to, don't feel you have to coach because the parents are there. Sometimes when you first start coaching, you think you have to be telling all the time, but just sitting back sometimes and letting the players play is just as important as you giving them all the information, letting them think for themselves, let them learn from their own mistakes. So don't feel because there are parents in the hall that you have to be talking and coaching all the time.
For me, I'll try and give a slightly different perspective. I've had a few people in the past that have set up coaching businesses and are trying to develop an income from it. And obviously I agree with what the guys have said, you've got to enjoy it and get into it for the right reasons. But I suppose my advice would be to stick to, or certainly start with, your strengths. So if you are more comfortable in a school setting, then approach every school you possibly can and start to build your business around that. If you're more comfortable around one-to-one training, then build your business around that. Make sure you're marketing in the right areas. I think that you give yourself more chance of sustaining your income, and building a good reputation within the industry as well. So I'm not saying don't do those other things. You need to round that experience off for sure. But certainly if you're starting a new business or getting into it, then try and follow your strengths and what you're comfortable with.
Yeah. And also, if I can have my tuppence worth here, is when players used to take teams away for England, they'd always say, serve the ball short and loop to the middle, because it's a safe tactic. That's a good tactic against anyone. And I think you've got to be brave. And Malcolm McDonald wrote this book on football, and it was called Never Afraid to Miss. So what I would say to any young coach is never be afraid to miss, never be afraid to try something completely different. And if you fail 9 times and you get it right once, then you've done pretty well, rather than, avoiding the issue. Right. Well, time is beating us again. I'd like to say a big thanks to Matt, who's been quite in the background feeding us these questions. Once again, to my team of my regular team of Mark and Colin, but a massive thank you to Craig, Paul and Stephen, especially to Stephen, because he's put this group together tonight. And I've learned a lot tonight. It's great listening to you all. And probably I think as coaches, we don't actually do enough of this. So thanks again, guys. And next week, we have the international umpires. So we've got Stuart McGowan, Roy Claxton and Charlie Brown, and they're going to tell us what it's like to be umpiring it at a world level. Looking forward to that. The week after that, I get a week off. And then the week after that, we have Brian Keane as the forgotten Scottish champion. In 2 weeks' time, Terry McLaren will be taking the session, and we'll get the Scottish coach's viewpoint. So thank you very much indeed. And see you next week.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers, Dave.
We just go off, boys. We just go off and have a couple of minutes in the green room, and then we